Welcome to a journey through time, where we'll unravel the strange, often heartbreaking life of the medieval court jester, a man whose job was to spark laughter in a world of swords and secrets. Picture the floppy hat, the jingling bells, the quick-witted jests. It seems like a playful role, but one wrong joke could send you to the dungeon or worse. Before we dive in, take a moment to like this video if you're excited for the ride, subscribe for more, and drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always thrilling to connect with you across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe grab a cozy blanket, and let's step into the jester's precarious world. Being a court jester wasn't a dream. Job you applied for it was a fate thrust upon you. You didn't train at a comedy academy or audition with a polished act. Most jesters were chosen for something peculiar: a limp, a sharp tongue, a hunchback, or an oddly high-pitched voice. Maybe you were too clever for your own good, or just short enough to amuse a bored noble. One day, you're toiling in a muddy village. The next, a lord points and declares, "That one's funny. Bring him to court." Congratulations, you're no longer a person. You're a jester, handed a belled hat and a life sentence to entertain. Some jesters were scouted after a single accidental quip. Picture a peasant at a feast, slipping in the mud and muttering something witty about a pompous baron. The room roars, and by morning, he's not back in his hut, he's in the castle. Bells sewn onto his tunic, expected to be hilarious forever. Others were less lucky. Lords collected jesters like exotic falcons or gilded goblets, sometimes buying them from markets or gifting them to rival courts as sarcastic party favors. In 13th century England, a jester named Roland the Farter was famously gifted to King Henry II for his unique talent of performing a jump, a whistle, and a fart on command. That was his legacy, etched in court records. Once chosen, your life wasn't yours. You were the court's laugh dispenser, dragged out for feasts, tense diplomatic meetings, or to soothe a king's bad day. Refusal wasn't an option. In the medieval world, a man without a role, be it farmer, knight, or fool, was a vagrant, ripe for arrest or worse. You couldn't walk away, not unless you fancied starvation or a stint in the stocks. Your job was to entertain, but it came with a catch. You were always one misstep from disaster. A bad joke could earn you a slap, a banishment, or a noose. You were a high-wire act in a ridiculous costume, balancing survival on a smile. The jester's existence was performance without pause. You lived among nobles, but you were never one of them, just a curiosity, a living oddity. Your every move was watched, your every word expected to amuse. Eating alone in the great hall, someone might shout, "Why so glum, fool?" Passing the queen's table, better wink or curtsy with irony. Even in rare quiet moments, you couldn't drop the act. Sadness made nobles uncomfortable. Anger was dangerous. Reflection looked like plotting. If you weren't juggling or grinning like a manic sprite, they'd whisper of treason. Your home in the castle wasn't a chamber fit for royalty. You slept in a cramped nook near the kitchens, where the clatter of pots drowned out your thoughts, or a closet once used for brooms. You ate leftover scraps. The dogs didn't want your clothes, a mockery of fashion. The coxcomb hat, with its flopping horns and jingling bells, announced your every step like a warning. Your tunic, a garish patchwork of red, yellow, and green, was sewn from cheap wool that itched relentlessly. Curled toe slippers, also belled, ensured you couldn't even trip in peace. Every outfit screamed, "I'm not a person, I'm a punchline." Imagine wearing this daily through feasts, weddings, even war councils. No wardrobe changes, no dignity. Nobles tugged your sleeve to hear you jingle, laughing as if you were a toy. "Nice hat," they'd never say. Instead, "Don't trip on your bells, fool." Your appearance was a constant reminder. You were, beneath them, a court-approved goblin designed to reassure the powerful they were untouchable. Yet, you had to perform brilliance juggling knives, reciting poetry, mocking rivals while looking like a walking joke. Being funny was a brutal art. Nobles demanded fresh jokes, clever but not too cutting. The line between humor and offense was razor-thin and moved daily. On Monday, the queen laughs at a quip about her cousin's debts. On Tuesday, he's in the room, and it's treason. By Wednesday, she laughs again, but the king glares. You learn to wrap truth in riddles, or animal metaphors. The rooster with no eggs crows too loudly, you might say, hoping the king chuckles instead of ordering your head. Some jesters, like Tribolet in 16th century France, were whipped for mocking the wrong noble. Others, like Will Sommers under Henry VIII, walked the line so well they became confidants until they didn't. Failure wasn't just embarrassment, it was existential. A bad performance could mean jeers, chicken bones hurled at your head, or banishment to the stables. Medieval courts had no HR. If you bored the wrong lord, your next gig might be digging ditches or your own grave. You juggled through royal tantrums, danced around political intrigue, and smiled through it all, because showing your own pain was forbidden. Your dog died. Too bad. The duke's hunt failed. Make him laugh. Your tooth aches. Tell a pun anyway. Your job was to be an endless laugh track, no matter the cost. Yet the jester held a strange power, invisibility. Nobles spoke freely around you, assuming you were too foolish to matter. You heard everything: fairs, bribes, whispered rebellions. A king might pull you aside, asking, "What did the bishop mutter to the envoy?" You became the court's informant, a spy in bells. In 14th century Poland, a jester named Stochek overheard plots against the king and warned him, saving the throne, but was still mocked for his hat. Your knowledge was a blade, but a dangerous one. Lords smiled but distrusted you. Servants avoided you. One wrong truth, and your wit became your noose. The cruelest part, you couldn't be human. Grief, anger, exhaustion, those were for nobles, not fools. If you faltered, they didn't ask, "What's wrong?" They sneered, "Why aren't you funny?" Or worse, "Time for a new fool." You turned heartbreak into punchlines, burying pain under pratfalls. In 1520, a French jester named Brusquet, heartbroken over his wife's death, was forced to perform hours later, juggling through tears. The court laughed harder at his misery. Your fortress of wit hid your soul, because the moment they saw you as human, the illusion and your job shattered. You were the court's emotional thermostat. If the king frowned, you were blamed, a failed treaty. Your jokes weren't light enough, a royal tantrum. You didn't juggle fast enough. In 1386, a German jester was banished when the duke's hunting dog died, as if his quips could have saved it. If the king laughed, no one thanked you, they praised the wine. If he didn't, you prayed. You were both irrelevant and responsible. A paradox in a world where a monarch's mood could shift empires. The jester's life was a cage. Once a fool, always a fool. No retirement, no career change. You aged in your bells, slower and sadder, but still expected to dance. Leaving meant poverty. You had no trade, no land, no name beyond fool. In towns, you'd be a madman in motley, not a poet who once outwitted dukes. Your skills, music, satire, languages were dismissed as tricks. Nobles clapped for their own bad poetry, but silenced your brilliance. You had to shine just enough to survive, never enough to threaten. In 15th century Italy, a jester named Gonella was so clever he was exiled for outshining his lord. Feasts were your battlefield. You orbited the table, a jingly satellite of shame, breaking awkward silences with quips or handstands. Drunk nobles mocked your voice. Through bones, demanded pig impressions. You were their safety valve. Nobles couldn't insult each other, but you were fair game. In 1490, a Scottish jester was pelted with bread for a weak pun, yet he kept smiling. Silence was deadly. It shifted attention to the powerful, who'd blame you for their tension. You were consumed like the wine, forgotten when the plates cleared, retreating to your closet with a sore smile. Yet, in a court of lies, you were the only honest voice. Diplomats flattered, courtiers schemed. You could mock a king's policy, or a lord's greed, disguised as jest. Your puns hid dissent. Your mimicry exposed hypocrisy. In 16th century England, Will Sommers mocked court corruption so sharply that Henry VIII kept him close but never safe. Your truth was a tightrope, one quip too bold, and laughter turned to glares. Jesters had been hanged for less. You were the court's conscience, a mirror and bells, but unprotected. When you died, no one cared. You faded in a corner, replaced, before your bells stopped ringing. No eulogy, no legacy. You never married, owned land, or built a name. The cook might recall your goat dance years later, but the court forgot you. In 14th century France, a jester named Jean was buried outside the churchyard, too unholy for sacred ground. You lived for their laughter, but it faded, leaving only the soft jingle of bells no one remembered. The jester wasn't just a clown, he was a warning. In a world obsessed with power, he reminded nobles of their fragility. His jokes exposed their flaws, his truth cut deeper than swords. He was necessary, a contradiction, low-born yet bold, ridiculed yet feared. Centuries later, we see him not as a fool, but as a haunting figure, the one who spoke truth while the room laughed. Now, let's step from medieval courts to ancient stages, where theater was born in divine chaos. In 6th century BCE Athens, the city Dionysia festival honored the god of wine and madness. Crowds chanted dithyrambs wild, masked hymns blending prayer and performance. Around 534 BCE, Thespis broke from the chorus, speaking as a character, birthing the actor, hence thespian. Greek theater became a sacred mirror, reflecting human fears and triumphs in amphitheaters like the Theater of Dionysus, seating 17,000 under the open sky. Tragedy, or goat song, was theater's heart. Named for goats sacrificed to Dionysus, or awarded as prizes, it tackled fate, betrayal, and hubris. Aeschylus added a second actor, Sophocles a third, and Euripides brought raw emotion to plays like Oedipus and Medea. Actors, all male, wore oversized masks, sorrowful mouths, fear to project to thousands. Voice and gesture were everything, no microphones needed. Tragedies were competitive, funded by wealthy citizens, attended by all, blending art, religion, and civic duty. Comedy, led by Aristophanes, was tragedy's rebellious twin. Plays like Lysistrata, where women withhold sex to end war, mocked politics, and philosophers with surgical wit. Masks were grotesque bulging eyes, snub noses, exaggerated appendages, for laughs even in the back row. Comedy wasn't just humor, it was dissent. Aristophanes the cloud savaged Socrates so fiercely it may have fueled his trial. Later, new comedy softened into domestic plots, shaping Roman plays and modern sitcoms. Roman theater turned Greek art into spectacle. Plautus comedies, full of lewd gags and mistaken identities, and Seneca's violent tragedies, like Thyestes, thrilled crowds. Theaters became imperial propaganda. Nero even performed, forcing audiences to watch or face death. Lavish staging, cranes, real executions prioritized shock over subtlety. Roman amphitheaters, seating tens of thousands, inspired everything from Shakespeare's Globe to modern stadiums. 00:38:00 in ancient India. Theater was divine. The Natya Shastra 200 BCE to 200 CE called drama, a gift from the gods to uplift souls. It detailed stagecraft, gestures, mudras, and rusty emotional essence, like love or fury. Kalidasa's Shakuntala wove mythology and morality, performed in courts and villages. Actors trained for years, chanting and dancing to evoke spiritual harmony. Folk traditions like Kathakali blended theater with dance, making every performance a prayer. Chinese theater evolved from Zhou dynasty rituals to Tang's Pear Garden Academy, founded by emperors. Yuan dynasties, Zaiyu dramas, mixed poetry, comedy, and social critique, led by playwrights like Guan Hankin. Peking opera, with its color-coded makeup and symbolic gestures, turned bare stages into imagined worlds. Theater was a ritual of history and harmony, balancing earth and heaven through performance. Japan's No theater, born in the 14th century, was a whisper of drama. Kanami and Zemi crafted it for samurai, blending chant, dance, and masks that shifted with light. Plays about ghosts or lost lovers evoked Yogan mysterious grace. Minimal stages, with pine tree backdrops, slowed time, inviting introspection. No's influence lingers in Kurosawa's films and modern, minimalist art. Puppet theater thrived in Asia. Indonesia, as wayang kulit, used buffalo hide puppets to cast shadows of Hindu epics, guided by a Daling narrator, sage, comedian. Japan's bunraku featured lifelike puppets moved by 3 puppeteers, their chanter's voice carrying the soul. Puppets mocked emperors or questioned fate safely, turning wood into truth. Their legacy lives in everything from marionettes to digital avatars. Ancient theater's echo endures. Greek dialogue and character arcs shape modern plays. Roman spectacle informs arenas and sitcoms. Indian rasa influences dance and cinema. Chinese opera's symbolism lives in martial arts films. No and bunraku inspire minimalist directors. Every TikTok skit or Broadway show carries this ancient need to perform, reflect, and connect, a mirror of our oldest stories. Now, meet Kanani, a Macedonian princess forged for war. Born to Philip II, an Illyrian warrior, Odata, she was no silk-clad diplomat. While other girls wove, Kanani trained with spears, rode across rugged terrain, and studied battle tactics. Raised in a court of ambition and betrayal, she learned power, was seized, not gifted. Half-sister to Alexander the Great, she watched his rise but carved her own path. Mastering silence and strategy in a world that worshipped his name, Kinane's legend sparked in Illyria, her mother's homeland, where she led a military campaign. Not just a figurehead, she fought, strategized, and won, shocking a world where noblemen often avoided the front lines. In 337 BCE, her victory proved she was no mere royal she, was a commander. She built influence independent of Alexander, who was busy conquering Persia. Soldiers admired her, nobles feared her. But Kinane's ambition wasn't for herself alone. She was raising her daughter, Adia, as a future queen. Kanani married Amyntas, a minor royal, to tie her bloodline to power. After his likely assassination by Philip II, she raised Adia with fire, training her in rhetoric, leadership, and combat, just as Odata had trained her. Kanani saw Alexander's empire fraying without a clear heir. Her plan: marry Adia to Aridius, Alexander's half-brother and heir, to secure the throne. This wasn't just ambition, it was survival in a splintering empire. In 323 BCE, an Adia set out for Asia to seal the marriage. Regent Perdiccas, fearing Kanani's influence, her army, her bloodline, her popularity, ordered his brother Alcetus to stop her. On the road, Kanani was assassinated, unarmed but defiant, demanding to see the king or rallying soldiers to her cause. Her death sparked outrage. Soldiers rebelled, forcing Perdiccas to allow Adia's marriage. Kanani died, but her strategy lived. Her daughter, now queen, Adia, renamed Eurydice, became a force. Married to Aridius, a king with intellectual disabilities, She ruled in his stead, addressing armies in military dress. In 319 BCE, she challenged Regent Polyperchon with royal decrees and speeches that echoed Kinnane's fire. Soldiers, loyal to her mother's memory, listened. But Olympias, Alexander's ruthless mother, saw her as a threat. Betrayed by her troops, Eurydice was captured and forced to suicide in 317 BCE. Her husband murdered soon after. Their deaths were a warning to women who dared rule like kings. Kinani and Eurydice weren't just royals, they were a dynasty of defiance. Kinani fought on battlefields when women were expected to marry for alliances. Eurydice spoke to armies when queens were meant to be silent. Their stories, buried by male historians, linger in fragments coins, bearing Eurydice's name, tales of soldiers outraged. They came close to reshaping Macedon, proving women could lead, fight, and rule. Their fire burns in the margins of history, a reminder that power doesn't need permission, only opportunity. Let's shift to martial arts. Born not in dojos, but in ancient rituals of survival and spirit, early hunters' lunges and evasions became combat patterns ritualized across cultures. In India's Indus Valley, 4,000-year-old seals show fighting stances. In Africa, tribal wrestling marked rites of passage. In Mesopotamia, soldiers trained in grapples, their movements mimicking myths. Combat wasn't just practical, it was sacred, tying warriors to cosmic forces. India's Kalapatu, over 3,000 years old, emerged in Kerala as a path to transformation. In sacred Kalaris, students mimicked animals, snake strikes, peacock, grace while wielding swords, or the whip-like Urami. Alongside combat, they learned Ayurvedic healing, balancing power with compassion. Banned by British colonizers, it survived. In secret dances, a living link to warrior sages like Parasurama, who legend says shaped the art. China's Kung Fu, meaning mastery through effort, grew from Zhou dynasty drills to Shaolin temples, spiritual forms. In the 5th century CE, monk Bodhidharma taught monks animal-inspired movements, tiger strength. Crane graced balance meditation. Ki, life energy, guided every strike, aligning body with cosmos. Taoist Tai Chi emphasized yielding over force, influencing modern martial arts. Kung Fu survived dynastic wars as a philosophy of discipline, teaching victory without arrogance. Greece's pankration, introduced to the Olympics in 648 BCE, was raw combat, punching, kicking, grappling, with only biting and eye gouging forbidden. Fighters trained in strategy, not chaos, their skills vital for soldiers. Legends like Erhion, who won posthumously by locking his opponent in a fatal hold, embodied pankration's blend of technique and will. Its legacy lives in MMA, proving the body is the ultimate weapon in Egypt. 2000 BCE tomb art at Beni Hassan shows wrestling and stick-fighting tatib, a rhythmic martial dance. Warriors trained to protect Mat cosmic order using spears, chariots, and grapples. Combat was sacred, tying fighters to gods like Horus, though not formalized like Kung Fu. Egypt's martial spirit endures in its art and rhythms. Japan's martial arts began with yayoi warriors' practical techniques, evolving into kujitsu archery and kenjutsu swordsmanship by the Heian period. Bushido, the warrior's code, blended honor with skill, shaping jujitsu and modern karate. In the Kamakura period, samurai trained to die well, their combat a balance of heart and blade. Africa's martial traditions, like Hausa's dam boxing or Senegalese lamb wrestling, were cultural rituals. Dam's bare-knuckle strikes and Zulu stick fighting built courage, influencing Shaka Zulu's strategies. Combat blended with spiritual chants and dances, turning warriors into protectors of heritage. Ethiopia's spear and shield formations echoed in ritual wrestling, tying fighters to community. In the Americas, Aztec warriors trained with obsidian macuahuitl swords, embodying eagle or jaguar spirits. Inca soldiers mastered mountain warfare with slings and clubs. while North American tribes like the Lakota honed stealth and horsemanship through war dances. Combat served tribe, land, and ancestors. Blending strength with humility, ancient martial arts were more than fighting, they were paths to self-mastery. Coloripiados healer warriors, Kung Fu's spiritual athletes, Pancratians disciplined. Ferocity all taught control over ego and fear. Suppressed by conquest, they survived in dance, stories, and modern forms like judo and capoeira. Every kick today echoes a lineage thousands of years old, where strength is not violence, but purpose. From jesters to queens to warriors, these stories reveal a truth. The powerless often hold the sharpest truths. The jester's quips exposed. Noble flaws, Kanani and Eurydice, defied empires. Martial artists mastered spirit through strike. Their legacies wither in laughter, crowns, or combat remind us that courage shapes history, not permission. Thanks for joining me. Share your thoughts below, and I'll see you next time. We've journeyed through the jester's precarious wit, the sacred stages of ancient theater, the defiant fire of Kanani and Eurydice, and the disciplined spirit of martial arts. Each story reveals a truth. Those on the margins fools actors. Warrior queens, fighters often see the world most clearly. Their voices, though mocked or silenced, shaped history in ways we're still unraveling. Let's keep exploring, because the past has more to whisper. Drop a comment if something's struck you so far. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, let's step into the shadowy world of medieval alchemists, where truth was chased, not with bells, but with fire and secrets. In the flickering light of a 13th century workshop, an alchemist bends over a bubbling crucible. He's not a wizard, though the villagers whisper he is. He's a seeker, part scientist, part mystic, chasing the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance said to turn lead into gold and grant eternal life. Alchemists were the jesters of knowledge, ridiculed by some, revered by others, but always dancing on the edge of danger. Their work wasn't just about gold. It was about decoding the universe, finding truth in a world that feared questions. Like jesters, alchemists were outsiders. They weren't knights or priests, but they served kings and popes, promising wealth or divine secrets. Their tools were humble glass vials, charcoal fires, strange symbols scrawled in Latin, but their ambitions were cosmic. They studied stars, metals, and herbs, blending Greek philosophy, Arabic science, and Christian mysticism. Figures like Albertus Magnus, a 13th century scholar, wrote treatises on minerals while dodging accusations of sorcery. His student, Thomas Aquinas, called alchemy a noble art. But the church wasn't always so kind. The alchemist's life was a gamble. A breakthrough could earn a king's favor. A failed experiment might brand you a fraud or worse, a heretic. In 1317, Pope John XXII banned alchemy, fearing its challenge to divine order, yet hired alchemists for his own court. You worked in secret, your notes coded in riddles to hide discoveries from spies or zealots. One wrong patron, one exploded furnace, and you faced exile or the stake. Yet, you persisted, driven by a belief that truth hid in nature's patterns, waiting to be unlocked. Take John Daston, a 14th century English alchemist who wrote letters to kings, promising gold, but delivering philosophy. His texts, dense with metaphors about phoenixes and Mercury, weren't just recipes, they were meditations on transformation of metal and soul. He died poor, mocked by nobles, but his ideas influenced early chemistry. Alchemists like him weren't chasing wealth alone. They sought meaning, a spark of the divine in a crucible. Their failures laid the groundwork for science, their dreams, echoing the jester's truth. The world's deeper than it seems. Now, let's shift to the ancient world, where truth came not from fire, but from prophecy. Oracles, often women, were the theater's mystical cousins, channeling divine wisdom in cryptic words. In Greece, The Pythia at Delphi sat above a chasm, inhaling vapors, her riddles shaping empires. Kings like Croesus of Lydia sought her guidance in 560 BCE, only to misinterpret her warning and lose his throne. The Pythia didn't perform like an actor, but her words were a stage, forcing listeners to confront their fates. Oracles were both revered and caged. The Pythia, chosen from local women, lived in seclusion, her life dedicated to Apollo. Her prophecies, half poetry, half puzzle, were filtered by priests who often twisted them for political ends. Yet, her voice carried weight. In 480 BC, her cryptic advice to Athens, trust the wooden wall, led to the naval victory at Salamis, saving Greece from Persia. Like the jester's quips or an actor's lines, her words held power only if others listened, but they could shift history's course. In Rome, the Sibyls were oracles whose written prophecies, the Sibylline books, guided the state. Kept in the temple of Jupiter, these scrolls were consulted during crisis, plagues, defeats, omens. The Cumaean Sibyl, legend says, offered 9 books to King Tarquin. When he refused her price, she burned 6, selling the last 3 at the original cost. Her defiance echoes Kinonez. Power lies in knowing your worth, even when the world dismisses you. Oracles like theater reflected society's fears and hopes. Their truths veiled in mystery. O1:4, 6:0. O let single quotes S meet Hypatia, a 4th century Alexandrian philosopher whose brilliance defied a darkening world. Daughter of a mathematician, she taught astronomy, geometry, and Neoplatonism, her lectures drawing students from across the Mediterranean. Like Kanani, she wielded intellect as a weapon, navigating a city torn by religious strife. Hypatia wasn't a warrior, but her defiance was no less fierce. She refused to bow to dogma, teaching pagan philosophy as Christianity tightened its grip. Hypatia's classroom was her battlefield. She lectured on Ptolemy's stars and Plato's forms, her clarity cutting through superstition. Men like Synesis, later a bishop, called her divine guide, yet she faced growing hostility. In 415 CE, a Christian mob, stirred by zealots, attacked her. Dragged from her chariot, she was murdered with roof tiles, her body burned. Her death marked a turning point as Alexandria's libraries faded under dogma. Yet, her writings, preserved by students, shaped medieval science. Like Eurydice, she died for her truth, her legacy a beacon for reason. Now, let's explore ritual. Dances, the martial arts of the soul. Across cultures, dance was more than art, it was discipline, story, and spirit, much like a warrior's kata. In ancient Egypt, priestesses danced for Hathor, their movements mimicking stars to align earth with cosmos. In West Africa, Yoruba dances honored Orishas, each step a prayer for strength or harvest. These weren't performances for applause. They were rituals of survival, binding communities to ancestors and gods. In Polynesia, the Maori haka, a war dance, prepared warriors for battle. Its stomps and chants, channeling defiance. Performed today, it honors heritage, from rugby fields to funerals. In India, Bharatanatyam's precise gestures told epic tales. Its dancers trained with martial rigor, their bodies temples of rasa. Like Kung Fu's animal forms, these dances were disciplined expressions, turning movement into meaning. Suppressed by colonizers, they survived in secret, their steps a quiet rebellion. These stories actors, queens, fighters, alchemists, oracles, philosophers, dancers share a thread. The powerless see what the powerful miss. The jester's jest, the Pythia's riddle, Hypatia's logic. The haka's stompall cut through illusion to reveal truth. They faced ridicule, exile, or death, yet their voices linger in coins, scrolls, and rhythms. History buries the defiant, but it can't erase them. They remind us, courage, not crowns, shapes, legacy. As we close, think of the jester, juggling through pain. Kinan, spear in hand, Hypatia, teaching to her last breath, the dancer, stepping to an ancient beat. Their world wasn't kind, but they carved space for truth. Today, when you speak, create, or stand firm, you echo them. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Share your favorite story below, and let's keep exploring the past's hidden voices. Until next time, keep chasing truth, wherever it hides.